Jeannie Lauren Dowden for Conduit News, and today we have law professor Robert Steinbuch joining us. As many of you know, Robert is a law professor at the Bowen School of Law in Little Rock, but of course he is here in his individual capacity representing his own ideas. And Robert, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been a while. I think before we got on air, I was trying to think of the last time that you were here. It's probably been since springtime, I think, or maybe even before that.
It's crazy. Why are you guys ignoring me?
Ignoring you, Robert.
I know.
We can't ignore you because every week you text us. So it's
Exactly.
impossible to
I
ignore
got to keep
you.
you on your toes.
We would never ignore you, but thank you for joining us, and
My
especially
pleasure.
because you're going to be catching a flight soon. So
Yeah,
appreciate you making time.
sure thing.
I wanted to have you on. Of course, everyone knows that session is beginning in just a few days, and there are so many issues that Arkansans are talking about right now. And of course, things like FOIA. FOIA is in the news right now, specifically because of just the issue of Franklin County and the proposed prison that's going to be built there, but also just because I think people are. They've just got their head on a swivel because we don't know if it's going to be brought up again in the legislative session, but there are other issues to be aware of. And I wanted to just have you on and get your opinion of what you think is going to be happening during this session.
Yeah, it's a great question. Of course, what I think is the most important bill coming up in this session is one already introduced on November 20th. In fact, the first day you can introduce bills, and that's from our friend Dan Sullivan, and that's what's now SB3, which is essentially the same bill as last session regarding ending government discrimination known as affirmative action. And it's really about time. There are about 10 states already that have done this. So we'd be either 10 or 11. I don't remember what number. But it's an important act for us to do, act both in law, but also in activity. That is, of course, the Supreme Court ruled that these two schools up in the Northeast can no longer use affirmative action in admissions. And the logic of that case extends further. But I guarantee you that government entities throughout the country are resisting that by saying, well, that case deals with schools and those two schools. And so it's really critically important for us to move forward with a conservative agenda of ending government-based discrimination known as affirmative action by passing SB3. And it really will be a litmus test for Republicans. We have some division in the party regarding sort of the what some call the patriots and others,
Yeah.
and then the other groups that are sort of whatever their name is. And whatever those divisions are, it should stretch across all flavors of republicanism to be against government organized discrimination known as affirmative action. And we had some people last session, but it was really at the end of the session during the
Yeah.
speed dating process, who are Republicans who did not support this bill. And I guarantee you, if there are Republicans that don't support this bill now, they will know that come the next election. I don't see how Republicans can get reelected while opposing such a core plank of our platform.
Yeah, I agree. As you were saying that, and before you said that, we of course wrote about this. This was something that Conduit was in support of. We then published the votes. It was part of our scorecard, and I think what I'll do after our interview, and along with this interview, I will pull those votes and make sure that that is at the forefront of people's mind again, moving forward in this session. Because, like you said, there were a lot of conservatives who we would consider strong conservatives who voted against this bill, and they really grappled with it, which was so interesting to me. And as you also mentioned, it'll be a litmus test. And I think we will see if their rhetoric really matches up with the way that they push the button.
That's right. That's exactly right. That you have an R in front of your name is of no moment if you don't vote conservative values. And I'm tired of people saying, well, you got to vote for the R over the D. First of all, I don't have to do anything. But the
Yeah,
point there is that I will not be cornered into making a bad decision about
yeah,
who to elect. It's sort of like someone saying, well, if you were driving drunk and 100 miles an hour and you had to hit a kid or a grandmother, who would you hit? And my answer is I wouldn't drive drunk and I wouldn't drive 100 miles an hour. So
Right.
if you are presenting me two bad candidates, one with an R and one with a D, rest assured you're not guaranteed my support of the R
Mhm.
candidate, because I'm not going to be forced into that lousy decision.
Mhm. Um, well, and also to that point, I think a lot of these Republicans who I can think of several actually who voted against this bill last session, but they ran on a conservative agenda. They jumped on the Trump train and they are now saying we have this conservative mandate in the House. And so it'll be fun to watch. It'll be fun to watch.
Yeah.
Just how conservative are you?
Well, and indeed, if they want to come forward, or at least some of them, and say, look, this was done very last minute in the House, and
Sure,
it was during that speed
it
dating
was.
session at the
Yeah.
end of the
Did you call it
overall.
speed dating?
Yeah. And so if they want to come forward and say, look, I didn't have enough information then, I didn't know all of the facts, all of the law, and now am informed and will be voting for SB3, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. By the way, we all make mistakes, even if it wasn't a lack of information. Maybe you actually believed it back then, you studied it, but now you've come to the realization that that was an error. We all make
Yeah.
mistakes, right? I mean that sincerely. So
Yeah.
get
I
on
agree.
board, and that's golden. But
Yeah.
if you oppose it, and by the way, an opposition is a no vote or not showing up to vote. That's a no vote.
Yeah.
And that's how you score it on your scorecard, of course. Well, then that's a no vote. And I put
Yeah.
you in the camp with the Democrats. I expect the Democrats to vote no on this, right? This is a
Right.
fundamental disagreement as to philosophy. So don't
Yeah.
blame it on the Democrats, both of them, right? I mean, there's barely a Democrat in the chamber. So don't blame it on the Democrats. This is up to the Republicans to get done. And we have some really solid, wonderful conservative Republicans. So I don't see any problem with us passing this, but
Right.
we need to do it.
Yeah. What good is a super majority if you can't get something like this passed?
Right. This is the most
Also kind of
core
in this,
notion. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
also kind of in the same vein of this, is so maybe a month ago or so, there was a discussion amongst the Senate, some of their top issues or that they wanted to kind of poll and discuss. And one of those was tenure for professors. And so I was like, that's really interesting. I wonder why they are talking about tenure for professors. And so you have some insight into that. So share that with us.
Yeah. So this comes from other states like Florida passed some law diminishing tenure for professors. And the problem is conservatives, unfortunately, don't fully get it because tenure is they think it's a job guarantee. It's not a job guarantee, but it's a job contract, right? You're not an employee at will. You can only be fired if you fail to perform adequately. And conservatives say, well, we have a bunch of liberal professors. We do. And those liberal professors, it's really hard to fire them. That's partially true, but that's not the problem. Meaning, administrators at universities, and this is well documented in the academic literature, are more liberal than the professors.
Hmm.
So those administrators who decide whether to fire faculty don't need tenure to protect liberals. You know why they protect liberals? Because they're liberals. What tenure does, it protects the minority. And who's the minority in
Yeah.
academia? Conservatives. I
Okay.
guarantee you this. Under prior administrations, not the current administration at my school, but under prior administrations, if there was no tenure, I and other conservatives would have been fired. I guarantee it.
Mm.
So tenure protects the minority, which happens to be conservatives. If in
Yeah.
20 years we can actually get a balance of conservatives and liberals into academia, maybe we could have another discussion. But at this point, if you diminish tenure rights of faculty, all you do is guarantee that academia moves further to the left. So I get the motive, but the outcome will be precisely the opposite of what these conservatives want. So
Well, so what would
please,
you suggest then? If this is clearly that, this went out amongst the caucus and
yeah,
Senate, this is a priority of theirs, potentially a top priority.
right.
Um, so then what would you suggest to them?
Well, not to do it, right?
Okay, don't touch it.
Well, if you want to change the dynamic in higher education, you've got to change the dynamic at the administrative level. So, guess what? The legislature has a lot of influence when it comes to, say, appointing presidents, appointing
Yeah.
chancellors. And we just got a new president for the University of Arkansas. I haven't met him yet. I don't know him, but his background looks very good. It looks like
Hmm.
he might bring some common sense ideals. Sometimes we call those conservative, right?
Yeah.
To higher education. So the way to fix the problems that you see of the woke left indoctrination in academia, and let me be clear, there's woke left indoctrination in academia, is from the
Yeah.
top down, right?
Yeah.
Because what they're trying to do is, well, we got to change the professors. But all you're doing is giving further authority to leftist administrators.
Hmm.
It's not going to change leftist professors. What you need
Yeah.
to do is update who you put in these top positions. And the administration and the legislature has a lot of influence in that. And that was seen, by the way, in this appointment, because
Yeah.
there were other people vying for this appointment who luckily didn't get it. Like I said, this fellow, I don't know him at all, but his credentials are very impressive. That's how you move academia into the mainstream.
Well, and also, whenever things were going on with that, um, oh, that event that was going on a year or so ago, I had Jay Green on to talk about it, and he said also one of the ways that you deal with this is to pull funding with these
That's right.
institutions,
That's right.
especially a flagship university like the university. Look at the appropriation and then go from there because look, those are tax dollars, and so that's also another way to do it. Okay. The
I
Supreme Court.
agree.
Well, go ahead.
I agree. You're talking about, of course, the King Fahd Middle
That's
Eastern.
what it was. I didn't
Right.
want to misspeak. And so,
Right.
but I knew that you would remember.
Yeah, which I like to call KFC, right? King Fahd Center. So it's extra crispy. And the King Fahd Center has, amongst other things, one of their professors who put up on her door at the university, put
Yeah,
up two signs. One said Palestine River to the sea. By the way,
I
river to
remember
the
that.
sea are the borders of the state of Israel. So it calls for the destruction of the state of Israel and replacement with a state called Palestine. And then she had another one that basically it equated the Israeli point of view with the KKK.
Yeah,
Right. So this is a kind of leftist claptrap that you hear. She has been
yeah,
protected by her administrators. So if you took away tenure, do you think she would be going anywhere? No.
right.
The problem is at the administrative level, and we can do something about that, right? And remember, the other thing the legislature can affect is appointments to the board of trustees. Now, I think the governor appoints them, but of course, the legislature has a voice in that. And the governor has made some nice appointments since. This is how you change the dynamic in higher education from the top down. Of course, as conservatives, we generally recognize that, right? We recognize that leadership matters.
Hmm.
And so if you're doing away with tenure rights for the bottom level and you're giving that power to mid-level managers, administrators, you're not
Yeah,
changing the dynamic. So I
right.
get the motive, but it's not the means.
All right, that's really good. Thank you, Robert. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit to the Arkansas Supreme Court. We recently saw, I believe it was right before Christmas, some appointments to the Supreme Court. Of course, we have a new Supreme Court Chief Justice, Justice Karen Baker, the first female Supreme Court justice.
Chief Justice.
She beat Rhonda Wood, and already there's a little bit of drama, I guess you
It's
could say.
pandemonium.
It is. And so, for our viewers who have not been following it or they don't really know what's going on, catch everyone up to
Yeah.
speed and give us your take on it.
So the new Chief Justice Karen Baker took office on the 1st.
Mhm.
She fired 10 people immediately, and then she sought to appoint two or three, I think three, but I don't remember, people to the Judicial Discipline Committee. It's not the full name. That's the group, the body, constitutionally created, no less, that disciplines judges, including her. Well, those 10 people that were fired, her action in doing that was illegal, as was her appointment to the JDDC of those three people. Both the Constitution and statute, respectively, give those rights to the court. And of course, the court is the body of 7 people, and it takes a majority to make a court decision. So it's at least 4 of the 7 have to make those decisions, and yet she took those on herself. The court then spoke as a body and said both of those actions are null and void. And prior thereto, as you mentioned, sort of around Christmas time, she, Karen Baker, that is, went with Justice Courtney Hudson and a former clerk of Baker's, whose name I forget, into the office, or to the office, I should say, of a fellow by the name of Marty Sullivan. And Marty Sullivan is the chief of the administrative office of the courts. And Baker apparently knew that Marty wasn't around, and she went into his office. And when Marty got back, he reports that his office was disheveled. And now, in retrospect, given these firings that she had made, which included both Marty Sullivan and the chief of the Supreme Court Police, it looks like maybe she was trying to orchestrate or introduce that office to her former clerk, who she might have wanted to put into that position. It's not clear, but that's a logical deduction. Well, as I said, the court has countermanded those actions. Those actions were illegal and really so beyond what should have happened that it's, I believe, impeachable. And this will require the legislature to get involved, and the House would have to draft articles of impeachment. But I really think this is so bizarre. And my reporting tells me, or my people that talk to me tell me, that more is to come, including today. So we'll see what happens. But it's one thing to have a disagreement on the court. It's another thing to go against what the Constitution says and what statute says. And that's what Karen Baker did.
Yeah, it's like justice has gone wild. I mean, it's just like you said, it is bizarre.
That's right. That's exactly right.
It's so bizarre. Well, we'll be following it. And what do you mean when you said something possibly today? Can you just give us a hint?
Oh, yeah. My understanding is that Chief Justice Baker is going to be issuing something even today regarding sort of this ongoing dispute. But I don't know the substance of it. That's just what I
Okay.
hear is in the works.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll be on the lookout for that. Okay. Before
Yeah.
we go, FOIA Task Force will be meeting again soon. There are several openings on that task force. I know that I was looking over the agenda: House Speaker, Arkansas Association of Counties, and Municipal League. Talk to us about the FOIA Task Force, what you guys are talking about, and your perspective. We mentioned at the very beginning of the interview, but we've covered a lot. But as we move into session, what you guys are thinking about and looking ahead towards session regarding enshrining or protecting, I guess I should say, our Sunshine Law.
Well, the FOIA Task Force is a legislatively created body signed by the governor. The law was, of course, meaning it's a statutory body that exists to advise legislators. Just advise, we don't control. And the idea is to have balance on it. And so I suspect that those positions that have not yet been filled haven't been filled because they came open between sessions. So there was no real priority. But yeah, those groups, of course, should fill those positions. Those groups tend to be favoring restrictions on the FOIA. But the point is that the task force wants to have a balance of views. So we'll see if those get filled. But I believe, and the committee the task force believes that we perform an important function. And I think we have in the past provided our recommendations on proposed statutes in a way that has created positive outcomes. So I look forward to doing the same. This will be my last year on the task force, in fact, because I'm now termed out, and that's just fine.
Yeah. Have you had, in the time that you've been there, have you guys worked with a lot of legislators
Yes.
on FOIA?
Yes, there are a lot of legislators who really do respect
Okay.
that task force, and they seek to meet with us. We've met with a bunch of them who have had bills, and we've suggested changes to them.
Yeah.
And many have said, well, those are great changes. And they've
Okay.
adopted those changes. So
Yeah.
that's the whole point of it, which is sometimes you pass a bill and there's unintended consequences. Well, if you run it by the FOIA task force, you'll likely reduce that potential, not eliminate, but reduce it. So it's really serves many useful functions. And again, I didn't create it. You didn't create it. This was created by the legislature and the then governor. And so let's respect that and allow it to do its job. And I think most people are. There are, as you know, sort of the big attempts to change the FOIA, both in the special session and the last actual session, general session, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
The prime proponent of that bill to undermine the FOIA, as I would describe it, didn't come before the task force. And that's really unfortunate. And it's really undemocratic because, after all, the FOIA task force was created by the legislature and the governor for the people.
The last changes that were made that came from the special session, um, now that they are in effect, do you see any problems with them? Do you think that now that they are kind of in practice now that they need to be tweaked, or that any changes need to be made or updated this coming session, or do you think that they're fine?
Overall, I think they're fine. I think some folks have suggested that there could be minor improvements, and that might very well be true. But I also recognize that when we legislate, we can't have perfection. And
Yeah,
if you keep carving and carving at
sure.
a piece of wood, well, then all you wind up is with sawdust. So
Yeah,
I thought the compromise that was produced was a good one. I appreciate it from all parties, legislature, from the governor, from those who were resistant to change in the FOIA. I really think the process worked.
yeah.
People should hopefully take a page from that book, and we can move on to other things like SB3, which I mentioned earlier in this program.
Yeah. Well, one thing I know that you asked you this before we went on air. You're not really following the Franklin County Prison, and that's
Mm.
okay. Um, Regardless of where people fall, if the prison needs to be built or if it shouldn't be built or the way that it was handled by the state, I understand both sides. I think what is fascinating or interesting to watch unfold is just through the FOIA documents, the way that it happened from the state Department of Corrections. And just, Robert, I think that you said, well, it doesn't really interest me. I'm not really following it. You would find it interesting if you look through some of these FOIA documents. And I'm not going to ask your opinion because you're not familiar with it. But yesterday, uh, transparency advocate and attorney Joey McCutcheon and a resident from Franklin County, Adam Watson, they were kicked out of Board of Corrections meeting yesterday, even though all of the Board of Correction members were emailed. It was with the contractor for the prison. A lot of people were emailed about it. And the only reason why they knew about this meeting was through FOIA. And, one comment that they made was, had the original bill passed from special session, they wouldn't know probably 75, 85% of what they know now about Franklin Prison, about the prison being built, had that been passed. And so I think it just really speaks volumes on why we have got to protect our Freedom of Information Act, because that's the only way, that's one of the ways, but it's such an important way that we can see what government is doing. and bring transparency and
100%.
accountability.
100. Look,
If we don't
like
have that, what do we have?
that's it is at the forefront of ensuring that the people have the ultimate say in what their government does. I don't know much about the prison issue, but I know a fair amount about the FOIA. And for sure, we need to have transparency on all issues, including this prison issue. And there is this penchant for government to resist disclosure. And it's unfortunate. There are notable exceptions. At the FOIA Task Force, by the way, we had a bunch of people on, we did a meeting by Zoom, like you and I are doing now. And there were a bunch of people that dialed in, so to speak, from the public and the press, as they should. And
Yeah.
we had no problem with that. We welcome that.
Yeah.
And so it can be difficult to break the mindset often of sort of these middle level managers in government, that transparency is a good thing. And like I said, I don't know about this meeting per se, but we should have a mindset as government employees. Our government employees should have this mindset that, hey, whether or not it's required to be open, why don't we actually be open?
Yeah.
I mean, what's wrong with
You
that?
want to sit in on this meeting that has
Right.
30, 40 people in, and we're talking about something being built in your community? Sure, yeah.
Come
Yeah, take a
on.
seat. Yeah.
Now, if people become disruptive, that's, then you call in the cops, you say,
Right.
sorry. But
After all, it is our salary is with your money. So
right,
sure, take a seat.
right. I mean, that's my point. Is like, why, irrespective of where that line is drawn for a public meeting, bring
Right.
people in. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Have,
Yeah.
have this sort of sense internally about being open. That's sometimes hard, particularly for mid-level folks in government.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I'll let you go. But I think that's the whole problem. It's like this DNA of, no, we have to keep it, we have to keep it quiet and, protected. And it's just this, there has to be just this mind shift of, no, this is the public work. We are literally public servants.
That's right.
And we are here serving you. And if you want to sit in on a meeting for a little while, come sit in on a meeting.
That's right.
Absolutely. Like just, yeah, be respectful but that's going to take a big mind shift. And also I think a different mind shift of these government officials thinking that they know better than the people. And I'm like, before you became a legislator, like you were no better than anyone else in these communities. Like you had a regular job just like everybody else before you started working at the Marble Palace. So
Look,
anyway,
legislators can get
let's
things
not
wrong.
go on this road, Steinbuch, because we we might get on a tangent and
Let me just say this, that, legislators can get things wrong, but so can the public get things wrong. So it doesn't mean that
absolutely.
because someone who sits in is going to
Yeah,
fix things, but
right.
let them listen. And then
Let 'em listen.
then they can contact you and share their views, or they can share them with other people. But that's what democracy is about. And democracy
Yes.
is not the most efficient process, but it's
No,
better than all of the alternatives.
it is. Well, as Joe, our co-founder, also often says, what people often forget is that true freedom is very messy.
Very messy.
And people tend to forget that. But anyway,
And it ain't
Robert,
free.
and it's all right. Thank you so much for joining us
Thanks,
and for
Jenny.
taking time walking through all of these issues. And we'll have you back on very soon.
Look forward to it. Talk to you soon.
Okay.